Welcome. In this interview, we will be talking about the topic of innovation, more specifically user innovation. And with the advance of artificial intelligence, it becomes much easier to search for this innovation type. Here with me are Professor Eric von Hippel from the MIT Sloan School of Management and Sandro Kaulartz from the international marketing company Ipsos. They have published an article on this topic with the title Next Generation Consumer Innovation Search, Identifying Early Stage Need Solution Pairs on the Web. Thank you for joining this round to discuss your paper. My name is Volker Lippitz, and I'm the head of technical departments at the Technology and Innovation Consultancy in Vensity. Eric, Sandro, can you shortly introduce yourselves?
I'm a professor at MIT. I study innovation and where innovations come from. I've been doing it now for 30, 40 years and have a large community of people who work with me on this topic.
Sandro?
My name is Sandro Kaulartz, and I'm working for Ipsos, a global market research companies, and within I'm working in the area of social intelligence and analytics, and within I'm in charge of building analytic products, having the pleasure with work like people like Eric and academics to really build new capabilities and methods, specifically for unstructured social data.
Thank you.
I keep telling him he should get his PhD. Come over to MIT with me. I don't know what the hell's so long taking you. Hello.
My first question will go to you, Eric. Within your article, you point out that users innovate in all consumer good fields. Examples are sports and hobby, where you also have your example of the kite surfing. Yet there's also dwelling-related innovation, medical, child-related, and so on. But is this limited to consumer goods only?
No. Users, whether they are users of industrial goods or companies who are making new processes or consumers making new products for themselves, they all innovate to serve their own needs better. It's simply that this particular paper focuses on a process for picking up consumer innovations in consumer-generated content on the web. So the phenomenon occurs both in industry and amongst consumers, but the method we describe here is applied to consumers.
Okay, thank you. So we will be talking a lot about need solution pairs. Can you shortly summarize the concept for our viewers?
Sure. Conventional problem solving assumes that you start with a need. In the US, we say in marketing research, find a need and fill it. So you frame a problem, and then you say, I wonder, has somebody solved this problem or must I solve it? When you look on the web, you are not restricted to a predefined need. You can search for a novel need that you never thought of before, which is coupled to a user-developed solution that proves its value. So when we get into the kind of web search that Sandro and I are talking about, what we are looking for is not people who have solved a fixed need. We are searching for people who have identified any need and then solved it. The result of this is that there are many innovations that companies never even thought of asking about that can be discovered and considered by companies for commercialization.
Okay, so basically this means you are looking for the unknown. So Sandro, obviously the first question that comes to my mind is, how can you systematically search for something if you cannot name it? Can you summarize the approach you have written in?
Yeah, I think the problem that Eric and I wanted to solve is there is this wide field of user innovations, but it's widely unknown to producers because there's no easy access to it. And we see, and I think COVID-19 has taught us, there is a tremendous amount of users building their own solutions for problems that are essentially their real world problems they see every day. And what we really wanted to do is using the web as a large innovation mine. The challenge with it is that, as you rightly say, it is widely unknown by producers. And here's where semantic AI algorithms enter to really discover relationships and really from a very bottom-up approach, discover these need solution pairs that Eric was talking about. So I think what we really wanted to do is to give producers easy access to this landscape of user innovations they may not be aware of. And while that was incredibly challenging in the past, now with the availability of large data, with the available AI methods at everybody's fingertips, there's no reason not to look at it to design more user-centric innovation processes.
Yeah, and I just add, Volker, you said, how do you search for the unknown?
Yes.
Sandro makes it very clear. It's known to the users, it's just not known to the producers.
Mm.
So you are searching for things that users have said, A, I've come up with it, you may not know about it, and B, I find it very valuable. Those are the signals we're looking for.
Okay. So, Eric, you also are very well known for your lead user research and concept. And in this context, a lead user is a single person that creates a new need solution pair. And if you look at classical marketing approaches, they usually try to identify the needs of a whole group. So would you say that the lead user approach is opposed to classical marketing research because it is focused on individuals, users, rather than on a whole group?
Well, marketing research, when it looks at the center of a market, is always behind. There is a leading edge. And in the leading edge, you discover people who have innovated for their own purposes. Our research shows that the pioneers are always users, essentially, when function is novel, because producers cannot estimate the market. They have no idea how many people will want a skateboard or a heart-lung machine. No idea at all. But the doctor who wants a heart-lung machine knows exactly what he wants and can justify building it. So when you say that it's single users you're looking for, not really, because Sandro and I also look for indications of social and commercial value. So for example, we wouldn't necessarily see the first person to develop a skateboard. By the time we look, and still before producers are aware, there will be 10,000 skateboarders. They're just all at the leading edge of the market rather than the center. So they're lead users. Some of them are innovators, but it can be a community phenomenon as well as an individual one.
How many would you say out of the specific domain are lead users?
Well, it's a relative term. So lead users are simply defined as ahead of the market and therefore encountering needs that are sort of ahead of the commercial product area. But you don't say it's 3% or 5%. You simply say we can search the leading edge and discover important innovations there.
So, and what would be then the benefit for the company who would identify such lead users? Is it something we get better products out of it, or faster innovation process, more successful products in the end?
Well, you know, when you're looking at the center of your market, what you generally find is that users want some modification to what you're already offering. They want an increased number of blueberries in the muffin. They want a reduction in the power requirements of a device. When you look at the leading edge, what you discover are fundamentally new things that will become major. So it's not at all that conventional marketing research doesn't work just fine to determine people's relative wish for a reduced price product versus an energy efficient one. It's just that when you're coming in with something absolutely new, the center of the market doesn't know about it yet.
So you can have some kind of edge on other companies if you are aware on that.
Yes, because companies are myopic. They look in the center of the market. They systematically throw out lead users as outliers because they want to analyze the center. Yeah. It has always astonished me. I'll say, look at this. It's a brand new product. And they'll say, well, yeah, but that user's very odd.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I so remember, I don't know, a little anecdote here. A company that was, we did lead user studies. We came up with bikers, people who were doing long distance biking, who had developed the equivalent of power bars to help them on their way. This was before there was anything about functional foods. And we said, look at this, they can bike better. And the manufacturer said, well, yes, but when we survey housewives from 29 to 40, they don't seem to know anything about it or be interested. So they you know, ordinary market research methods focus on the center of the market, but they also tend to put blinders on the researchers.
Yes. So
you said yes, Volker. I'm glad you said yes.
So the users we are talking about, they have some kind of motivation and to share in the community what they have developed. They are somehow self-rewarded and they have fun to share it, informing other peers, learning from others. This is also a topic of your studies. Isn't it also gaining recognition and acknowledgement from the community that they are after?
Well, you know, so two sides to this. One is firms are set up still on the model of we find a need and then we develop a solution in-house. So that even if you bring in solutions from outside, companies often do not welcome them. And yet they are so important. Let me give you another example. Producers of equipment for type 1 diabetics were not at the leading edge, Medtronics and so on. People were dying who were type 1 diabetics because basically there was not an artificial pancreas yet. One of the things you have to know is that very sophisticated people go home at night and become users. These are not DIY people with lesser skills than the R&D people in a company. In fact, they're the same people at night. And if those people have a serious disease like diabetes, they are not going to sit around waiting for a company to decide it's in its interest to develop an improvement. So there's a wonderful group, specifically in the diabetes area, that adopted the motto, "We are not waiting," because one of their members almost died. People came from everywhere to work on the next generation artificial pancreas. In a matter of weeks, they had completed what companies said would take 5 years. They put it on the web. Thousands of users downloaded it and made copies for themselves. And the manufacturers still resisted. So, you know, it's not like companies in general welcome this information. It's a form of forcing them to move faster, and they may or may not like it.
Yes. So there is usually no recognition aspect to it. It's the self-reward which is in the center of the users.
Yeah, they're trying to save their own lives. They're doing something they enjoy, or whatever it might be, but they are rewarding themselves. That's right. And the companies, by the way, when they adopt user-developed innovations, they seldom acknowledge the source. They say, look at our marvelous XYZ. So I think corrections have to be done there too. Search for lead user innovations. You'll have to improve them to make them producible and so on. But then acknowledge where you got it from, would be my advice.
While we are talking about companies, Sandro, you are trying to commercialize this approach at Ipsos, your company. So I could imagine that there are some fields like kiteboarding or the example that we just heard, that more ideas are shared, for example, window cleaning. Have you ever noticed such an effect?
Yeah, we are right now piloting it with our clients, really to get more experience under our belt. And we had certainly cases where we came in with preconceptions. Oh, there is nothing going on in the area of cold and flu management or pet food. But we all ended up being pretty surprised how much there is. And I think the richness is deeply underestimated, even for people who do that every day, like me. So far, it's quite amazing. Also, not just the volume, but also the broadness. And I think one key benefit of the methodology is really bottom-up based. It's really an explorative algorithm that would really map out the entire landscape of user innovations. And yeah, there are certainly markets and domains of interest where the unmet needs prevail, the solutions that consumers develop, just because of the reasons that Eric just mentioned. Not everybody brings the technical knowledge to it, but have an idea and can describe it and can start something and use the web communities to work together on a problem. So, so far, I actually have been positively surprised, even in categories where I thought it wouldn't end very well or very rich in terms of insights.
Very interesting. I also was very surprised when I wrote the paper where Eric said the research finds that 90% of the lead users are self-rewarded. And for me, this is a very surprise finding, this huge share that we talk about. Eric, are there any other striking characteristics that most lead users have in common?
Well, lead users, as we said, have their own need, as in the example of type 1 diabetes. It can be an entertaining need like skateboarding, or it can be something vital to your health, like the artificial pancreas. They freely reveal because they're collaborating openly. You know, you couldn't do it in a hidden context, number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, they don't necessarily want to. I mean, one of the things that you have to understand is that everybody, when these are highly technically trained people typically, they have a day job. Now, in my case, I'm a tinkerer. You and I talked about the fact that back in the day, we had mechanical engineering training in our master's degrees or whatever. And so I had a problem with my foot, with a tendon. I went to the surgeon. He said, wear this. It was terrible. It didn't work at all. So, of course, I built my own, brought it, showed it to the doctor. He said, that's marvelous. And I said, I want to give it to you. And he said, well, no, you have to invest in starting a company. I can't just receive it. You know, I have to buy it from somebody. And I said, well, no, I actually enjoy my present job. I'll give it to you as a gift, but I'm not going to build it for you.
Thank you. So, Sandro, the core of the paper describes a search approach leading to formerly unknown need solution pairs. And despite the effort to spend, I don't see any reason why a producer of some consumer good should not test this approach in your own domain. So to walk through the four-step process once that you describe in your paper, what effort would you expect in total?
So far, from the most recent pilots, it depends a little bit on the depth of insight that you want to deliver, right? So it's a question of scope. But in the very last one, it took us 10 days with a team of 4 people from the moment that you have your data corpus collected from the web until you're in a position to deliver the insights to your client. So it's fairly fast.
Yeah, it's quite fast.
There was a lot of work building the algorithm, right? So I'm completely ignoring the fact that we have been working with Eric for almost 2 years to get there. But now, as the algorithm is highly transferable across categories, there's also less need for data scientists to adjust it to specific categories. So it can be incredibly fast. So the moment you get it done once, the scalability is quite high.
Yeah, I have to say it's fantastic working with Sandro. You know, I mean, this guy is amazing. So, and it, you know, when you're really an expert, you can make it so that other people can use it who are less expert. And that's really what he and his colleague named Benoit are engaged in.
Are there any major effort drivers that you already know of, so that makes it more complicated to apply the method?
Yeah, I think one critical step is actually properly defining the initial search field. So where really do you want to find? And you know, there is this risk of going in too narrow, that you know, have a very precise definition of what you're after, but then the data corpus is not sufficient enough to find anything, right? When you go in too broad, you pretty much inflate your data corpus, and you know, you will find a lot, but if it's helping you to really, you know, invent in a specific field, maybe questioning. Right? To give you an example, if somebody would want us to look into foods, that's too broad, because we would look at, like, I don't know, 50 million data points from last month alone, and just sifting and cutting through the noise of this data corpus would be highly inefficient. So focus and obviously data availability is a critical aspect. And one other thing that we learned on the way, and obviously we are seeking for efficiency and so on, but I don't want to really give the impression that the human expert and really bringing in a subject matter expertise in this process is critical, because it's really designed for human-machine interaction. Just to give you one example, in this kite surfing pilot that essentially is part of the paper, when you circle around the topic concept of innovation, so anything that relates to fixing a problem, hacking something that existed before, you would discover things that in the first instance feel pretty odd. So an example, at some point, I saw, you know, the topic concept of teabagging from kite surfers. And, you know, while initially you think, okay, that needs to be removed, that's a mistake, the algorithm discovered it for reasons that I can't understand. But looking deeper into it with the subject matter expert, you actually discover teabagging is a very common problem in kite surfing. It's when the wind is overpowering, you lose control of the kite, and then the kite makes you dip in the water and lifts you up like a tea bag. So people use this term to start building new security feature in kite surfing equipment, because back until then, all innovations from company have been really, okay, we need to create kites that are enabling faster surfing. But there was not, like, there was a mismatch between the security features and really the speed of travel, if you wish. So people started to work on new security features. and I'm mentioning it because that is a very classic example of bringing in an expert, and he will tell you, oh no, teabagging is something that is very interesting to look at. And I would have just removed it because it felt like a mistake in the data corpus. Mm-hmm. So really, the last point I wanted to make is bringing technology and semantic AI together with really who knows the field very well is fundamentally important to the success of applying this methodology.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one thing we should point out, Volker, is that Sandro and I bridge academia and his firm, but the agreement we have with his firm is that we publish methods fully, and we are very happy when others come in and try to improve the field and so on. You know, Ipsos is ahead in many ways. They have secret sauces galore, not to mention they have Sandro, but we invite, you know, we invite participation. We want to build this field.
So if we are already on the topic of the method itself, so you have been describing in the paper that you use Python libraries, GenSim and SpaceA. How do these AI tools fit in the research? What do you give there as an input for the natural language processing, and what is the output?
So we use actually an internal build version of something that is called a word space model. And what we have been giving in the paper is, because we do realize not everybody wants to work with us and reapply it by themselves. So Spacey, an example, is a great Python library that can essentially do the same. We're using an in-house model for the reasons that I just explained. We have created a process that allows human-machine interaction, where you collect the data corpus, you let the algorithm search for the innovation concept in that data corpus. So language based on vector models that relate to fixing problems, solving something, inventing something, or hacking something. And what the algorithm essentially does, it turns words or expression into vectors, meaning numerical values. And then it looks at the neighborhoods. And with doing that, you understand really the meaning context of innovation. What are other expressions from consumers when talking about innovations? And then after you have circled around this environment and you defined your guardrails, what innovation means in your particular case, you can then start analyzing what are the objects of innovations within. Are these tricks or features? Are they equipment? Are kites or boards? So you discover, and that's the beauty of it, because it's highly explorative in the way it works. So the output is, as a first step, is really cutting down to this innovation core in your pretty large data corpus. And we are really talking about, it's also very important to collect a lot of historic data, right? I would not recommend only looking at the past 3 months. In the case of kitesurfing, we essentially went back to the hour zero when the sport discipline started, which meant up to 13 years, if I remember correctly, of data that we collected. So you're dealing with a high data mass, and the algorithm that we applied is a first filtering mechanism. But then, as I said, you need a subject matter expert who brings in this knowledge to really discover, is this actually something that brings functionally novel features to the sport discipline, or is it just somebody who wants to create an all-black kite and it's more an aesthetic innovation or reproduction of something that existed already. So this validation step is very important in the process. Otherwise, you're just collecting words around innovation without really understanding the deeper meaning and why did this individual created something to solve a particular problem, which then eventually leads you to need-solution pairs, as Eric described earlier.
So that's also one of the strengths of artificial intelligence, that you can train such models in advance and reuse them. Would you think it's possible to have a specific words-based model for a specific application for finding these solution pairs that is pre-trained and reusable?
Yeah, that's what we did essentially. So the time it took us was really taking something that was really part of our day-to-day work, but making it better and more specific for this need solution pair search. And that took a while. But we are right now working on a second generation, because there are really ways to make that more efficient, and really with the latest achievements in the natural language understanding, and things that simply didn't exist the moment we started working on it, because the landscape is changing so fast. We're right now exploring ways to make this process more efficient, which should ideally reduce the human time that is required. But I also, as I said earlier, think it is very important to have a subject matter expert as part of the process, because I don't think we will get there with really meaningful outputs when we let it completely autonomously run by an algorithm.
Okay, thank you. So that was very interesting. Any last sentence from your side, because we are running out of our time?
Well, in my case, I simply want to say that the lead user process, in effect, or lead user concept, has been around for several decades, but it was too hard to do. It was costly for companies. They would continuously come and say, "This is so hard. We know it's out there, but it's simply too hard." So we think, Sandro and I think Ipsos as well, and many academics, that finally, when we get this down to 10 days, finally people can start to really interface with lead user innovations. The other thing I'd like to say is that when you do a search, remember how at the beginning of this conversation we talked about need solution pairs, right? So when you do a search, and let's take kite surfing, when you do a search, you discover things that are a mix. You discover some things that are improvements. You might have been able to do this with standard marketing research. In other words, a more reliable harness for somebody who is a kite surfer. Well, in the center of the market, people might well have complained about existing equipment, saying, it's just, you need a better harness. But what you also find is the breakthroughs. So for example, what we found there was drone surfing. In drone surfing, you throw away the kite. All of a sudden, it's a changed sport. Now you don't need the wind. Now you can go up mountains. You can do all sorts of extraordinary things. So standard marketing researchers talking to standard kite surfers in the middle of the market would never discover these things that are going to totally change their field within the next 10 years. So the method is now economical and viable, and it is, I would say, remarkably good for breakthroughs. I mean, Sandro, with his standard clients, in areas like you mentioned, cough and cold, Sandro, right? Found completely new things there, where the R&D department said, "Oh my God, we never thought of that." And that's an old, tired category. So there are opportunities all over. And we hope companies grasp them.
Thank you. Sandro? What from your side?
Nothing to add to what Eric just said. I think the opportunity for us is really to help our clients to just bring the user right in front at the very, very fuzzy front end of early innovation, where usually things are pretty internal, informed by marketing, R&D departments, maybe some trend and future agencies who tell you about how the future in a category will look like. But we still see a lot of innovation failing in the markets. And one reason for it is that they may be not grounded deep enough on really true consumer problems. And the hope for us is to really learn constantly. Our vision is to embed that into a real-time capability where every day you can learn about these are problems that people are facing on the street, and these are the solutions that correspond to these emerging needs. So really enabling clients to just become better at innovating and a little less internal and listening more to how people live their lives and how products and brands are a part of it. I think that's the truly interesting opportunity it has.
Thank you.